$1 million case had no solution, until a prisoner stood up and changed everything. The tension in the Los Angeles courtroom was so thick you could cut it with a knife. For the third consecutive time, the dispute between the heirs of Johnson Construction had reached a stalemate that even the city's best lawyers couldn't resolve. That's when Jennifer Wilson, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, felt her heart race as she recognized the numbers being presented on the screen. She was there only as part of a mandatory rehabilitation program, required to observe hearings to better understand the judicial system. She never imagined she would see something that would change her life forever. Your Honor, with all due respect, but there is a fundamental error in these calculations, said Jennifer, standing up abruptly from her seat in the gallery. A deathly silence fell over the room. Every head turned to look at the black woman with her curly hair pulled back, whose hands were trembling slightly. The guard responsible for her took a step forward, but Judge Deborah Thompson raised her hand, calling for calm. "Ma'am, you do not have the right to speak in this hearing," said Attorney Richard Williams, the lawyer for the plaintiff, visibly irritated by the interruption. Jennifer took a deep breath. She knew she was taking a huge risk, but she couldn't stay silent in the face of what she was seeing. Those numbers told a different story from the one being presented, and she knew that language better than anyone else in that courtroom. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but I am a certified public accountant with 20 years of experience. I worked for 15 years at Johnson Construction itself, and what I'm seeing on that screen does not match the facts, continued Jennifer, pointing to the projected documents. The siblings Michael and Elizabeth Johnson exchanged suspicious glances. For 8 months, they had been battling in court over the inheritance left by their father, the businessman William Johnson, who had built an empire valued at $50 million before passing away from a heart attack. Each accused the other of having manipulated the company's documents to get the larger share of the inheritance. Judge Deborah, a 62-year-old woman with graying hair and a penetrating gaze, studied Jennifer for a few seconds. There was something about that woman's demeanor that piqued her curiosity. In her 40-year career, she had learned to recognize when someone truly knew what they were talking about. "Your name, please," requested the judge. "Jennifer Wilson, Your Honor, Certified Public Accountants Board registration number 1CA24567. Currently serving a sentence of 2 years and 4 months for embezzlement of funds to pay for my mother's medical treatment." The defense attorney, Attorney Robert Miller, stood up immediately. "Your Honor, this woman is a convicted criminal. We cannot allow her to—" "Attorney Miller," interrupted the judge in a firm tone, "everyone deserves to be heard when they have something relevant to contribute. Continue, Ms. Wilson." Jennifer felt her legs go weak, but the certainty of what she had seen gave her strength. She walked to the front of the courtroom, escorted by the guard, and asked for permission to approach the table where the documents were. "If you'll allow me, I would like to point out a discrepancy in the dates of the bank transfers that everyone seems to have overlooked," she said, her voice firmer now. Elizabeth Johnson, a 38-year-old woman with blonde hair and a tired expression, watched everything with heightened attention. There was something familiar about that woman, but she couldn't place what it was. "Look here," continued Jennifer, pointing to a specific line on the document. "This transfer of $2.5 million was made on March 15th of last year. But look at the date of Mr. William Johnson's medical certificate that's in the court records. He had been hospitalized in a coma for 3 days when this transfer was authorized. The court-appointed administrator, Attorney Henry Davidson, a 50-year-old man with a salt-and-pepper mustache, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His eyes avoided direct contact with Jennifer as she continued her explanation. "Furthermore," Jennifer continued, "this digital signature here, which supposedly authorized the transfer, has a validation code that didn't exist in the construction company's system in March of last year. This code was only implemented in June. Michael Johnson, 41 years old, tall and athletic, who until then had been blaming his sister for the confusion in the numbers, began to pay real attention to Jennifer's words. "How do you know that?" he asked with genuine curiosity. "Because I helped implement that code system when I still worked at the company," replied Jennifer, looking directly at him. "I recognize my own work. It was then that Elizabeth remembered. Her eyes widened as she finally recognized who was standing before her. "You're Jennifer, the accountant Dad always praised. You handled the entire financial side of the company," exclaimed Elizabeth, rising from her chair. "But you disappeared about 3 years ago. We never understood why." Jennifer lowered her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of all the injustice she had suffered. When she raised them again, there was a steely determination in her gaze. "I didn't disappear, Mrs. Johnson. I was abruptly fired and then framed for something I didn't do. But I'm not here to talk about my past, but to help resolve this issue that is destroying the family I always respected. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing." Attorney Henry Davidson stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, I protest this irregular situation. A convicted person cannot interfere in—" "Attorney Davidson," the judge cut him off, "Mrs. Wilson is presenting technical information that deserves our attention. Proceed, Mrs. Wilson." Jennifer asked for a sheet of paper and a pen. With precise movements, she began to draw a flowchart, showing how the bank transfers should have worked versus how they actually happened. "Look here," she explained, showing the paper to everyone. "If these transfers had really been authorized by Mr. William, they would have followed this pattern he always used. Every transfer over $100,000 needed to go through 3 levels of approval: his, the responsible accountants, and the court-appointed administrators." Michael studied the drawing with increasing attention. "And what exactly are you trying to say?" he asked. "That someone with access to the system created an alternative route for these transfers, bypassing the security protocols your father established," replied Jennifer, looking directly at Attorney Davidson. "And this person needed to know both the accounting system and the company's legal procedures very well." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Deborah observed every reaction, every movement of those present. In her years of experience, she had learned that the truth often revealed itself not in words, but in people's gestures and expressions. "Attorney Davidson," said the judge, "I would like you to clarify some questions about these transfers." The court-appointed administrator adjusted his tie knot, visibly nervous. "Your Honor, all transfers were properly authorized according to the documentation presented. I see no reason for questioning based on the allegations of a person who knows the system better than anyone in this room," interrupted Elizabeth, who had approached the paper where Jennifer had drawn the flowchart. "Jennifer, are you saying these transfers were made illegally?" Jennifer hesitated for a moment. She knew her next answer could completely change the course of that proceeding, and also that it could bring serious consequences for her. "I'm saying there is a pattern in the irregularities that cannot be a coincidence," she replied carefully, "and that someone took advantage of Mr. Williams' health condition to execute transfers he would never have authorized." Michael approached the table where the documents were. "Jennifer, can you show us specifically where these irregularities are?" he asked in a respectful tone. For the next 15 minutes, Jennifer pointed out one by one the inconsistencies she had identified. With each explanation, it became clearer that someone had systematically manipulated the company's finances during the period when William Johnson was hospitalized. "There's one thing I still don't understand," said Elizabeth, studying the numbers. "If these transfers were irregular, where did this money go?" Jennifer picked up another sheet of paper and quickly began doing some calculations. "If my math is correct, approximately $8.5 million were embezzled in small transfers made over a period of 6 months. Small enough not to draw individual attention, but which add up to a significant amount." Attorney Robert Miller, Michael's lawyer, spoke up. "Ms. Wilson, do you have any idea who could have done this?" Jennifer looked again at Attorney Davidson, who had remained silent during her explanations. Then she looked over the documents once more. "I would need to analyze the digital signatures more carefully, but I can say that whoever did this was intimately familiar with both the company's procedures and Mr. Williams' hospital routines." Judge Deborah Thompson tapped her gavel softly on the table. "I will order a 1-hour recess so we can analyze this information more carefully. Attorney Davidson, I ask that you remain available to the court." During the recess, Jennifer was escorted to a private room where she was surprised by a visit from Michael and Elizabeth together. It was the first time in months the siblings were in the same room without arguing. "Jennifer," said Michael, "we need to understand your story better. You said you were fired and then framed. What exactly happened?" Jennifer took a deep breath. She knew the moment had come to tell the whole truth. 3 years ago, I started noticing some small irregularities in the company's accounts. Nothing too big, but enough to worry me. I reported these concerns to the court-appointed administrator, Attorney Davidson, who at the time also handled some internal administrative procedures. "And what did he say?" asked Elizabeth. "He told me they were just normal adjustments and that I shouldn't worry. But the irregularities continued, so I decided to speak directly to your father." Michael leaned forward. "And did Dad listen to you?" "Your father always listened to me. He became concerned and asked me to prepare a detailed report on everything I had noticed. I was working on that report when I was suddenly fired, under the allegation that an embezzlement of company funds had been discovered." Elizabeth shook her head, indignant. "But that doesn't make sense. Dad trusted you completely. He always said you were the most honest person he knew." "The amount I supposedly embezzled was $2,000, Jennifer continued, bitterness in her voice. "They claimed I used a company check to pay personal bills. In reality, it was money I desperately needed to buy medicine for my mother, who had cancer. But I would never take money that wasn't mine." Michael and Elizabeth exchanged a look, beginning to understand the scale of the injustice. "And how did you prove your innocence?" asked Michael. "I didn't," replied Jennifer with sadness. "The check had my signature. The security cameras showed me at the bank, making the withdrawal. Everything seemed too real. My attorney said it would be better to accept a plea deal to reduce the sentence." "But if you didn't do it, how do you explain the evidence?" questioned Elizabeth. Jennifer looked directly at them. "For a long time, I couldn't explain it. Only recently, in prison, did I have time to think and analyze everything that happened. Someone very clever created a perfect situation. They used my desperate need to help my mother against me, forged convincing evidence, and eliminated me exactly when I was getting close to discovering larger irregularities." The silence in the room was heavy. Michael ran his hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. "Jennifer, are you saying you were deliberately framed to be removed from the company?" "I'm saying I don't believe in coincidences, especially when the same manipulation techniques that were used against me are being used to embezzle millions from the inheritance that should be yours." Elizabeth stood up and began to pace the small room. "If this is true, it means that Daddy spent the last years of his life thinking you had betrayed him. He was devastated by your dismissal. He was never the same after that." Those words hit Jennifer like a punch in the stomach. No matter how hard she tried to stay strong, tears began to stream down her face. "Your father was like a second father to me," she said, her voice choked. "I worked 15 years at the company. I watched you grow up. I was part of all the family's important moments. Not knowing what he really thought of me in his last years is one of the things that hurts me the most." Michael approached and, surprising everyone, put his hand on Jennifer's shoulder. "Jennifer, if there really was an injustice, we will correct it, not just for your situation, but because it means whoever did this to you is now doing it to us, too." "Exactly," agreed Elizabeth. "And if we can prove all of this, maybe we can not only resolve the inheritance issue, but also clear your name." When they returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere had changed completely. The Johnson siblings were now clearly on the same side, united against a common enemy they still needed to fully identify. Judge Deborah resumed the session with a serious expression. "During the recess, I requested a preliminary verification of the information presented by Ms. Wilson. The results confirm that there are, in fact, significant inconsistencies in the documents presented." Attorney Henry Davidson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Based on this," the judge continued, "I am ordering a complete audit of Johnson Construction's accounts to be performed by independent experts, with a specific focus on the period identified by Ms. Wilson." "Your Honor," protested Attorney Richard Williams, "this will delay the resolution of the case even further. The heirs have already waited months for a decision." "Attorney Williams," replied the judge, I prefer a delay in the search for truth to a decision based on possibly fraudulent information. Jennifer stood up again. Your Honor, if I may, I can significantly speed up this process. I know the company's accounting system like no one else, and I can guide the experts directly to where they should look. Ms. Wilson, said the judge, are you willing to cooperate officially with this investigation? I am, Your Honor. Under one condition, that someone please visit my mother at the senior living center where she's staying. She's 78 years old and hasn't seen me in 4 months. Elizabeth stood up immediately. I'll visit her today, she said with determination. What's her name and where is she? Mary Wilson. She's at the Hope Senior Living Center in Silver Lake. She doesn't know exactly why I'm in prison. I told her I was taking a training course. Michael also spoke up. Jennifer, we will take care of your mother as if she were our own grandmother. It's the least we can do. Judge Thompson observed the entire interaction with growing interest. It was rare to see such a significant transformation in the party's behavior during a proceeding. Very well, she said. I appoint Mrs. Wilson as a temporary technical consultant for this audit, under judicial supervision. Attorney Davidson, you will remain available for clarifications as needed. During the following days, Jennifer worked tirelessly with the team of experts. Her familiarity with the company's system allowed them to quickly identify not only the discrepancies she had mentioned in court, but a much more complex network of irregularities. Look at this, she said, pointing to a computer screen while working with the court-appointed accounting expert. These transfers were made using authorization codes that theoretically only Mr. William could generate. And what's the problem? Asked the expert. The problem is that these codes were created 6 months after Mr. William lost the ability to operate them. He had a first stroke in September, which affected his motor coordination. But look, these codes have his digital signature dated March of the following year. Michael, who was closely following the work, shook his head in disbelief. Does this mean someone was using Dad's digital identity even after he could no longer use it? Exactly, Jennifer confirmed. And look at the timing of these transfers. They were all made between 2 and 4 in the morning. Your father was always a person of very regular habits. He went to sleep at 10 at night and woke up at 6 in the morning religiously. Elizabeth, who was also present, asked a pertinent question. Who would have access to the system at that hour? Only people with full administrative access, Jennifer replied, which to my knowledge were only 3, your father, me, and the court-appointed administrator. But you had already been in prison for a year when these transfers were made, Michael observed. Exactly. Which means someone took over my access or had their own access that was never officially disclosed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. As the investigation advanced, an even more sinister pattern began to emerge. The experts discovered that the irregularities hadn't started only during William Johnson's illness, but much earlier. Jennifer, said the lead expert, these manipulations have been going on for at least 5 years. How did you not notice before? Jennifer studied the data with redoubled attention. Because they were done in an extremely clever way, she admitted. Look, small transfers that could pass for normal accounting adjustments, always compensated by equivalent deposits a few days later. At the time, it seemed like someone was just reorganizing cash flow. But now, asked Elizabeth, now I see the complete pattern. They were temporary transfers. The money would go out, earn interest in short-term investments, and then come back. The profits stayed in parallel accounts. Michael slammed his fist on the table. So someone was using the company's money as working capital for personal investments. Worse than that, said Jennifer, continuing to analyze the data. These operations became more aggressive in the last 2 years when it became clear that your father's health was deteriorating. The person responsible was preparing for what would come next. What do you mean? Asked Elizabeth. That when your father passed, there would be a dispute over the inheritance, and during that dispute it would be much easier to divert larger amounts without anyone noticing, since everyone would be focused on fighting among themselves. The revelation left the siblings silent for a few minutes. It was hard to accept that someone had orchestrated not only the theft of the family fortune, but also the destruction of the bonds between them. "Jennifer," said Michael finally, "do you have any idea who could have done this?" "I have some suspicions, but I need more evidence before making accusations. One thing I can guarantee, whoever did this is someone extremely intelligent with deep knowledge of both the company and the legal system. Someone Dad trusted completely," added Elizabeth bitterly. "Unfortunately, yes. That night Elizabeth kept her promise and went to visit Mary Wilson at the Senior Living Center. She found a white-haired lady, still lucid, but visibly weakened by age and longing for her daughter. "You must be Elizabeth," said Mrs. Wilson, smiling as she saw the young woman approach. "Jennifer always spoke so much about you all. She said you were like the children she never had." Elizabeth felt a lump in her throat. She sat down beside Mrs. Wilson's bed and held her hand. "Mrs. Wilson, I came here to tell you the truth about Jennifer." During the next hour, Elizabeth carefully explained the whole situation, the wrongful imprisonment, the discovery of the irregularities in the company, and how Jennifer was helping to sort everything out. "I always knew my daughter was innocent," said Mrs. Wilson, with tears in her eyes. "Jennifer was always the most honest person I knew. She would never take anything that wasn't hers. We know that now, Mrs. Wilson, and we will do everything to correct this injustice." "How is she? Is she being treated well?" asked the elderly woman, worried. "She is well, yes, and very focused on resolving this situation. You can be proud of her. Jennifer is saving our family." Mrs. Wilson smiled through her tears. "I have always been proud of my daughter, but knowing that you believe in her means the world to me." The next day, the investigation took an unexpected turn when the experts discovered that some of the accounts where the money had been transferred were linked to companies that didn't exist in the official records. "They are shell companies," explained Jennifer to Michael and Elizabeth, "created specifically to receive and move these funds." "This is too sophisticated for one person alone," observed Elizabeth. "I agree," said Jennifer. "We need someone with legal knowledge to create these companies, someone with access to the construction company's system to make the transfers, and someone with financial knowledge to manage the investments." "3 different people, or one very capable person?" asked Michael. "Or 2 people working together," suggested Jennifer. It was then that she remembered a detail that had gone unnoticed. "Michael, Elizabeth, do you remember the accountant the company hired after I left?" "Of course," replied Elizabeth. "Mark Peterson, why?" "Because I just realized that some of these digital signatures have very specific characteristics. I knew the way each person in the company signed documents digitally. It was part of my job to verify these authentications." Jennifer picked up a document and showed it to them. "Look here. This signature is attributed to your father, but observe the keystroke pressure pattern. It's identical to the pattern I used to see on documents signed by Mark." "Are you saying that Mark was forging our father's digital signature?" asked Michael incredulously. "I'm saying that someone who knew Mark's typing habits very well created these signatures. Either it was him, or someone had prolonged access to his computer." Elizabeth stood up abruptly. "Jennifer, Mark worked directly with Attorney Davidson on all administrative procedures. They were practically inseparable." "And where is Mark now?" asked Jennifer. Michael and Elizabeth exchanged a worried look. "We don't know," admitted Michael. "He resigned last week, said he had received a better offer in another city." "Last week," repeated Jennifer with growing alarm. "Exactly when the audit was ordered by the court?" "Exactly," confirmed Elizabeth. Jennifer felt her heart race. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together in a way she didn't like at all. "We need to notify the court immediately," she said. "If Mark has disappeared with important evidence, that could complicate our investigation a lot." In court, Judge Deborah received the information seriously. "Attorney Davidson," she said, "do you know the whereabouts of Mr. Mark Peterson?" The court administrator hesitated for a moment before answering. "He informed me he was going to Miami, but he didn't leave a contact address. He said he would get in touch when he was settled." "Interesting," commented Jennifer, looking directly at Attorney Davidson. because according to the records we analyzed, the last irregular transfers were made exactly 1 week ago, on the same day Mr. Mark resigned. Attorney Davidson began to sweat visibly. "I don't see a connection between the two facts," he said, but his voice trembled slightly. "Perhaps not," replied Jennifer calmly. "But I would like to ask a question. Do you remember calling me the day before my dismissal, asking me to come to the company early the next day?" The administrator was silent for a few seconds. "I don't recall that specific phone call," he said finally. "I remember it very well," continued Jennifer. "You said an urgency had come up with an important client and that you needed my help to resolve a complex accounting issue. That's why I arrived at the company at 6 in the morning that day." "And what is the relevance of that?" asked Attorney Richard Williams. "The relevance is that it was exactly at that time, when there was practically no one in the company, that the irregular check was allegedly issued according to the accusation against me." Judge Deborah leaned forward, paying full attention to Jennifer's explanation. "Continue, Ms. Wilson." "For a long time I couldn't understand how someone had managed to forge my signature so perfectly on that check. But now, analyzing the forgery techniques used in the recent transfers, I understand perfectly how it was done." Jennifer walked over to the evidence table and picked up a pen. "Your Honor, may I demonstrate something?" With the judge's permission, Jennifer began to write on a sheet of paper. When a person signs documents repeatedly over the years, they develop very specific patterns: hand pressure, movement speed, even small irregularities that are unique to each person. She showed the paper to everyone. "This is my normal signature. Now observe." She picked up another sheet. "This is my signature when someone is guiding my hand, as if I were unconscious or under the influence of medication." The difference was subtle, but noticeable. The check I allegedly issued had characteristics of the second signature, not the first. At the time, I didn't know how to interpret that. Now I do. "What are you suggesting?" asked the judge. "That someone drugged me that day and used my hand to sign the check while I was unconscious." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even Attorney Davidson had stopped fidgeting in his chair. "That would explain why the security cameras showed me at the bank making the withdrawal, but I had no memory of it happening," continued Jennifer. "For months I thought it was stress or fatigue. I never imagined it could have been intentional." Michael stood up, visibly upset. "Jennifer, are you saying someone drugged you to frame you?" "I'm saying I now understand how all the evidence against me was created so convincingly, and the same person who did this to me is doing something similar with your inheritance." Elizabeth looked directly at Attorney Davidson. "Attorney Davidson, do you have anything to say about these accusations?" The court-appointed administrator stood up, visibly nervous. "Your Honor, these are very serious accusations being made by a person convicted of embezzlement. I see no reason to—" "Attorney Davidson," interrupted the judge, "are you willing to submit to an analysis of your personal financial transactions during the period in question?" The question took the administrator by surprise. "Your Honor, I see no need." "I do," said the judge firmly, "and I will also request that a search warrant be issued for your office and for Mr. Mark Peterson's office." It was then that Attorney Davidson made the mistake that would confirm all of Jennifer's suspicions. "Your Honor, this is absurd. Mark has nothing to do with this story. He was just following my instructions." All heads turned to him. The administrator immediately realized what he had just revealed. He was following the normal legal guidelines of any administrator, but it was too late. His attempt to correct himself only confirmed that there was indeed a direct relationship between him and Mark in the irregularities. Jennifer looked at him with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. "Attorney Davidson, for 15 years I respected you as a professional. I never imagined you were capable of all this." "I didn't do anything," he protested, but his voice sounded desperate. "You destroyed my reputation, separated a daughter from her sick mother, made Mr. Williams spend the last years of his life thinking I had betrayed him, and pitted 2 siblings against each other. All of that for money." Jennifer's words echoed in the courtroom with weight and sadness. The judge banged her gavel. "Attorney Henry Davidson is hereby ordered to be held in preventive custody on suspicion of forming a criminal organization, aggravated embezzlement, document forgery, and fraud." I also order an arrest warrant to be issued for Mr. Mark Peterson. When the security guards approached Attorney Davidson, he finally broke down. All right, that's what happened. But I didn't mean to hurt anyone. It started as temporary loans. I always paid the money back. Attorney Davidson, said the judge, you have the right to remain silent and to an attorney. No, I want to talk. I want to explain everything. He looked desperately at Jennifer. Jennifer, I'm so sorry for what I did to you. When you started discovering the irregularities, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. Jennifer looked at him with pity, not anger. Why, Attorney Davidson? You were always a respected person. Why did you do this? The administrator lowered his head. My youngest son needs a very expensive treatment abroad. I started by borrowing small amounts from the company, always intending to pay it back. But the investment started making a lot of profit, and I thought I could continue without anyone noticing. And Mark found out what I was doing and wanted in. He said if I didn't include him, he would tell everything. That's when things spiraled out of control. Michael shook his head in disbelief. And whose idea was it to frame Jennifer? It was Mark's, admitted Attorney Davidson. He said we needed a scapegoat to divert suspicion. We chose Jennifer because she was asking too many questions and because she had a difficult personal situation that would make the story more convincing. Elizabeth stood up, outraged. You destroyed an innocent person's life for your own convenience. I know, said Attorney Davidson, with tears in his eyes, and it eats away at me every day. Jennifer, I beg for your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but... Jennifer approached him. Attorney Davidson, I forgive you. But that doesn't change what you did. I hope you find peace, and that you can help your son with the money you earned honestly, not with what you stole. Jennifer's response surprised everyone in the courtroom. Even in the face of such injustice, she showed impressive generosity and maturity. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It's a huge help for us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. With Attorney Davidson's confessions, the trial took a completely different turn. Within days, the experts managed to map out the entire embezzlement scheme and identify where the stolen money was. Most of the funds were recovered, including the interest that had been obtained through the irregular investments. Michael and Elizabeth were finally able to settle the inheritance issue amicably, dividing the assets according to their father's original wishes. But the most important thing for Jennifer was the prospect of having her case re-evaluated. With Attorney Davidson's confessions and the evidence that she had been wrongfully framed, her lawyer immediately filed a request for a criminal review. Jennifer, Michael said on the last day of hearings, we can't thank you enough for what you did for our family. And we can't apologize enough for what our company did to you, added Elizabeth. Jennifer smiled, finally at peace. You are not to blame for what happened to me, and I didn't do this out of gratitude or revenge. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Even so, Michael insisted, we want to do something for you. When all this is settled, you have a guaranteed place in the company. In fact, we want you to be our new partner. The proposal surprised Jennifer. Michael, Elizabeth, that's very generous, but... It's not generosity, Elizabeth interrupted. It's justice. And besides, after everything that happened, we don't trust anyone else to handle the company's finances but you. Think about it carefully, said Jennifer. I'm an ex-convict. That could affect the company's image. You are a woman who was the victim of an injustice and who, despite that, had the courage and integrity to do what was right, Michael replied. If anyone has a problem with that, it's their problem, not ours. 3 months later, Jennifer's criminal review was approved unanimously. Her conviction was overturned, and she was officially declared innocent of all charges. Attorney Davidson was sentenced to 6 years in prison and a fine equivalent to double the embezzled amount. Mark Peterson was arrested in Florida and also convicted. On the day she was released from prison, Jennifer was greeted by a crowd. Michael, Elizabeth, Mrs. Mary, who had recovered very well with the regular visits from the Johnson family, and several people who had followed the case in the newspapers. How does it feel to be a free woman again? Asked a journalist. Jennifer thought for a moment before answering. I feel grateful. Grateful for having had the opportunity to prove my innocence. Grateful for the people who believed in me, and grateful for discovering that even in the most difficult situations, doing the right thing is always worth it. What are your plans now? I want to spend some time with my mother, who deserves all my attention after everything we've been through. And then I'll go back to doing what I love, taking care of numbers and helping companies grow honestly. 6 months later, Johnson Construction had become one of the most respected companies in Los Angeles. Under the financial management of Jennifer, who had been promoted to Chief Executive Officer, the company not only regained its stability, but also implemented innovative social programs. The most significant of these was the Second Chance program, which offered job opportunities and professional placement for people who had served sentences for non-violent crimes and were seeking to reintegrate into society. It was Jennifer's idea, explained Elizabeth to the visitors who came to learn about the program. She said that if she had had an opportunity like this, when she got out of prison, maybe she wouldn't have gone through so many hardships. The program became a national model, being replicated by other companies across the country. On a sunny Sunday morning, Jennifer was in the garden of the Senior Living Center, helping Mrs. Mary walk when Michael and Elizabeth arrived for the weekly visit that had become a tradition. "How's our chief consultant today?" Michael joked. "Great, but worried about the third quarter numbers," replied Jennifer, joking back. "Jennifer, do you ever stop working?" asked Elizabeth, laughing. "I do stop," said Jennifer, hugging her mother. "Especially on Sundays, when I can be with the most important person in my life." Mrs. Mary smiled, proud. "My daughter has become a very important person, hasn't she?" "Mrs. Mary," said Michael, "your daughter was always an important person. It just took the world some time to recognize it. And for her to recognize it herself," added Elizabeth. Jennifer looked around, observing the family she had gained, the mother who was well cared for, and the life she had rebuilt from the rubble. "You know what I learned from all this?" she said. "What?" the three asked at the same time. "That the worst situations in our lives can turn into the greatest blessings, as long as we have the courage to do the right thing, even when it's hard. And even when no one believes in us," added Mrs. Mary. "Especially when no one believes in us," Jennifer agreed. At that moment, a young man approached the group. It was Kevin, 23 years old, one of the first beneficiaries of the Second Chance program, who had become a team leader at the construction company. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I wanted to thank you again, Jennifer. It's been 6 months since I got clean from drugs, and I was able to make peace with my family. None of this would have been possible without the opportunity you gave me." Jennifer stood up and hugged him. "Kevin, I didn't give you anything you didn't already have inside you. I just believed in what you were capable of doing." "That's exactly what makes the difference," said Kevin. "Someone believing in us when we don't even believe in ourselves." After Kevin left, the group was silent for a few minutes, contemplating the simple beauty of that sunny Sunday. "Dad would be so proud to see what the company has become," said Elizabeth finally. "And even prouder to know that you've regained your place with the family," added Michael, looking at Jennifer. "Do you think he would have known I was innocent?" asked Jennifer, a question that still haunted her sometimes. Mrs. Mary spoke before anyone could answer. "My daughter, good people recognize other good people. Deep in my heart, I'm sure Mr. William always knew who you really were." "Mom is right," agreed Elizabeth. "Dad had many conversations with us about you after your dismissal. He always said that something didn't make sense, that you weren't the type of person who would do that." "Why did you never tell me this before?" asked Jennifer. "Because we thought it would be worse for you to know that he doubted your guilt," explained Michael. "We thought it would be even more painful." Jennifer smiled through her tears. "No. Knowing this is one of the most important things you could have told me." As the sun began to set, the group prepared to say their goodbyes. It was always hard to leave Mrs. Mary, but everyone knew she was well cared for and visited regularly. "Jennifer," said Mrs. Mary, holding her daughter's hand, "you know I'm the proudest mother in the world, don't you?" "I know, Mom. And you know that your father, wherever he is also proud of you?" "I hope so. Don't hope. Be sure." A daughter who is capable of forgiving those who harmed her and on top of that helping other people restart their lives. That daughter makes any father feel like the luckiest man in the universe. That night, Jennifer was in her apartment, which she had managed to buy with her first salary as a partner at the construction company, when she received an unexpected call. "Jennifer, this is Judge Deborah Thompson." "Your Honor, what a surprise. How can I help you?" "Actually, it's I who would like to help you. I'm organizing a seminar on justice and second chance for judges from across the country. I would like you to be our keynote speaker." The proposal took Jennifer by surprise. "Your Honor, I would be honored, but I don't know if I'm the most suitable person." "Jennifer," interrupted the judge, "you are exactly the right person. Your story shows that the system can fail, but it can also correct itself when brave people are willing to fight for the truth. And what exactly would you like me to talk about? About forgiveness, about courage, about how it's possible to rebuild a life after an injustice, and mainly about how each of us can make a difference when we choose to do the right thing." Jennifer accepted the invitation, and 3 months later, she was standing before more than 200 judges from all over America, telling her story. "When I stood up in that courtroom for the first time," she said, concluding her speech, "I didn't know if I would be heard. I didn't know if my words would make a difference. What I knew was that I could not remain silent in the face of an injustice." "And what is the message you leave for us judges?" asked a judge from the audience. "That every decision we make affects real lives, real dreams, real families, and that, sometimes, the person we least expect may hold the key to solving our greatest challenges." The speech was a resounding success and led to concrete changes in the American judicial system. Several courts implemented programs similar to the construction companies, offering opportunities for rehabilitation for people in situations similar to what Jennifer had faced. 1 year later, Jennifer was back in the courtroom where it had all begun, but this time as a witness in a case similar to hers. A young woman had been unjustly accused of embezzlement and was fighting to prove her innocence. "Ms. Wilson," said the defense attorney, "based on your experience, what would you recommend for my client?" "That she never gives up fighting for the truth," replied Jennifer, looking directly at the young accused woman. "No matter how difficult it seems, no matter how much the evidence is against her, if she is innocent, the truth will eventually come out. And if she can't prove her innocence, then may she use this experience to become a better, stronger, more compassionate person. The injustices we suffer can either destroy us or transform us. The choice is ours." After the hearing, the young accused woman approached Jennifer. "Ms. Wilson, thank you for your words. May I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Were you really able to forgive those who did this to you?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "You know, forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it wasn't important. Forgiveness is choosing not to let anger and resentment control your life. It's choosing to be free." "That sounds very difficult." "It is difficult, but it's possible. And when you manage it, you'll discover it's one of the most liberating things you can do for yourself." 3 years after that fateful day in court, Johnson Construction had become one of the largest construction companies in the country. The Second Chance program was serving over 1,000 people annually, and Jennifer had become a nationally recognized speaker. But for her, the greatest successes were the simple moments, the Sundays with Mrs. Mary, who at 81 years old remained sharp and cheerful, the work meetings where she could make decisions based on honesty and transparency, and especially the letters she received from people who had been inspired by her story not to give up on their own struggles. One such letter came from a young mother from rural Colorado. "Dear Jennifer, my name is Amy Peterson and I'm 28 years old. My husband left me when he found out I was pregnant, and since then I've been struggling to raise my daughter alone. 6 months ago I lost my job and was thinking of giving up on everything. But when I heard your story on television, I understood that I can't give up. If you managed to rebuild your life after so much suffering, I can too. Thank you for giving me hope." Letters like this reminded Jennifer daily of why it had been worth standing up in that courtroom and fighting for the truth. On a Thursday afternoon, Jennifer was in her office at the construction company when Michael and Elizabeth entered with serious expressions. "Jennifer, we need to talk to you," said Michael. Did something happen? She asked, worried. Actually, yes, replied Elizabeth, but then she smiled. We received a very interesting proposal. What kind of proposal? The federal government wants to implement the Second Chance program on a national scale, explained Michael, and they want you to coordinate the entire project. Jennifer was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. Would that mean leaving the construction company? Not necessarily, said Elizabeth. You could maintain a consulting role with us and dedicate part of your time to the national project. It's an opportunity to impact thousands of lives, added Michael. We can't be selfish and want you all to ourselves. Jennifer looked out the window of her office, watching the city's movement below. People coming and going, each with their own struggles, their own dreams, their own hopes. Can I think about it? Of course, said the siblings, almost in unison. That night, Jennifer talked at length with Mrs. Mary about the proposal. My dear, said the elderly woman, you always taught me that when we have a talent, we should use it to help as many people as possible. But, Mom, this would mean much more responsibility, much more work, and many more people being helped. Jennifer, your story didn't just happen so you could be happy. It happened so you could show other people that it's possible to overcome the worst situations. Are you sure, Mrs.? Mary held her daughter's hands. I'm sure you'll make the right decision, as you always do. And I'm sure that whatever your choice, I will be proud of you. The following week, Jennifer gave her answer. She would accept coordinating the national program, maintaining a partnership with the construction company as a strategic consultant. There's one condition, she told the government representatives. What is it? That the program be called the William Johnson Program, Second Chance, in honor of the man who taught me that integrity is worth more than any profit. The proposal was immediately accepted. 6 months later, the William Johnson program was operating in every state in America. More than 5,000 people had been helped in the first year, with a recidivism rate of less than 5%, a revolutionary number in the American rehabilitation system. Jennifer traveled across the entire country, implementing the program in different regions and adapting it to local needs. In every city she visited, she found stories that reminded her of her own. People who had been wronged, who had lost everything, but who hadn't lost hope. On one of these trips in Charleston, she met Samuel, a 70-year-old man who had been wrongly imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit and had spent 15 years in jail before proving his innocence. Ms. Wilson, he said during a program meeting, do you think there's still time for me to start over? Samuel, she replied, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that it's never too late to start over, as long as we have the will and people who believe in us. But I'm already 70 years old, and I know 20-year-olds who have already given up on everything. Age doesn't matter. What matters is determination. Samuel ended up becoming one of the program's most effective regional coordinators, proving Jennifer was right about second chances. 2 years after the national program's launch, Jennifer was invited to give a lecture at the University of California for law and business students. Does anyone have any questions? She said, concluding her presentation. A young student raised her hand. Professor Wilson, how do you manage to keep hope alive even after everything you've been through? Jennifer smiled. It was a question she often received, but one she never tired of answering. You know, for a long time I thought keeping hope alive was a choice that depended on me. Later I understood that hope isn't something we maintain alone. It grows when we share our struggles with other people, when we discover we're not alone, when we realize our story can help someone. But how do you know if it's worth it to keep fighting? Look around you, Jennifer replied, gesturing to the audience. You are all here because someone at some point believed you were worth fighting for. Your parents, teachers, friends. The question isn't whether it's worth fighting. The question is, who are you willing to fight for? A student from the back of the room raised his hand. And what if the person you're fighting for doesn't believe in themselves anymore? Then you believe for them, until they can believe again. That's what the Johnson family did for me. That's what my mother did for me my whole life. Isn't that a very heavy burden? It is a burden. But it's also the greatest privilege there is, knowing that your faith in someone can make the difference between that person giving up or continuing to fight. After the lecture, Jennifer was in the university parking lot when she was approached by a middle-aged man who had watched the presentation. "Ms. Wilson, my name is Robert Brown. I'm a journalist and I'd like to make a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "I'd like to write a book about your story. I think it can inspire many people who are going through difficult situations." Jennifer thought for a moment. "Mr. Brown, my story isn't special. It's the story of many people who suffer injustices every day. Exactly why it needs to be told, to show that it's possible to overcome them." "And what would the book's objective be?" "To inspire people, yes, but also to draw attention to the problems within the judicial system and to the importance of programs like the one you coordinate." Jennifer eventually agreed to the project on one condition: all the book's royalties would go to the William Johnson program. The book, titled The Woman Who Stood Up, was launched a year later and became a publishing phenomenon. It sold over 500,000 copies and was translated into 12 languages. But the most significant impact wasn't the sales, but rather the stories from people who contacted Jennifer after reading the book. One of these people was Barbara, a 62-year-old businesswoman from Denver who had lost everything in a fraudulent scheme and was considering giving up on starting over. "Jennifer, reading your story, I understood that my age is not a limitation. It's an advantage. I have experience, knowledge, and I still have a lot to offer. I decided to start over, and today my new company already has 15 employees. Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to fight." Another letter came from a young lawyer from Seattle. "Professor Jennifer, I graduated from law school 2 years ago and always thought my profession was only about winning cases. After reading your book, I understood that it's about achieving justice. I decided to work on cases for people who can't afford a private attorney. Your story changed my perspective on what it means to be a legal professional." 5 years after that transformative day in court, Jennifer was back in the city where it all began, but this time to inaugurate a new rehabilitation center named after William Johnson. Michael and Elizabeth were present, as was Mrs. Mary, who, despite being 84, made sure to participate in all the important events in her daughter's life. "Jennifer," said Michael during his inauguration speech, "when you stood up in that courtroom 5 years ago, you changed not only our family, but thousands of other families too. And it all started with a simple act, the courage to speak the truth," added Elizabeth. When it was Jennifer's turn to speak, she looked at the crowd and remembered that day in court when she felt completely alone, wearing the orange jumpsuit, not knowing if anyone would listen to her. "5 years ago," she began, "I was just a woman who had lost everything, my freedom, my reputation, my career. But I discovered that even when we lose everything we think is important, we can still hold on to the most valuable thing, our ability to do the right thing. Today we are here inaugurating this center, not because I am a special person, but because each one of you believed that it is possible to build a better world when we work together. This center will serve hundreds of people who, like me, need a second chance. But more than that, it will show all of society that people can change, can grow, can become better." After the event, Jennifer was talking with some of the center's first beneficiaries when a young woman approached her. "Ms. Jennifer, my name is Christina. I'm 25, and I got out of prison 3 months ago. No one wants to give me a job because of my past." "And what did you do before you were arrested?" "I was a hairdresser. I loved my work, but I made some mistakes." Jennifer observed the young woman for a moment. There was something familiar in her story, in her expression, in her mix of hope and despair. "Christina, would you be willing to work here at the center, helping other people who are going through the same thing you went through?" "I would do anything for an opportunity." "I'm not talking about anything. I'm talking specifically about using your experience to help other women who are leaving prison. Would you have the courage for that?" Christina began to cry. "Ms. Jennifer, it would be a dream come true, to be able to turn my pain into something useful for other people." "Then welcome to the team," said Jennifer, extending her hand to her. And so the cycle continued. People who had been helped became helpers. People who had received second chances began to offer them to others. That night, Jennifer was at home organizing some documents from the center when she received a call from an unknown number. "Hello, Jennifer. This is Henry Davidson." Jennifer was silent for a few seconds. It was the first time she had spoken with the former court-appointed administrator since his conviction. "Attorney Davidson, how are you?" "Well as possible. I'm serving the remainder of my sentence on day parole. I work during the day and sleep in prison. And how can I help you?" "Actually, I called to thank you." "Thank me?" "Your book reached us here in prison. I've read and reread it many times. I wanted to thank you for having publicly forgiven me. I didn't deserve such generosity." Jennifer sighed. "Attorney Davidson, we all deserve forgiveness when we truly regret our mistakes." "Jennifer, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "How are you able to not feel hatred for me?" "I destroyed your life," Jennifer thought before answering. "Attorney Davidson, for a long time I thought my life had been destroyed. Then I understood that it wasn't destroyed, it was transformed. If I hadn't gone through all of that, I would never have discovered my true life's mission." "Do you really believe that?" "I do. And you, are you using your time in prison to reflect on what you really want to do when you get out?" "I'm thinking about working with prisoner rehabilitation. I think my experience can help other people avoid making the same mistakes I made." "That sounds like an excellent idea. When you get out, look me up. Maybe we can work together." "You would do that, even after everything?" "Attorney Davidson, if I learned one thing from all this, it's that people can change, and that everyone deserves a second chance." 2 years later, Henry Davidson became one of the most requested speakers for the program, talking to business owners about the risks of corruption and to young people about the consequences of bad choices. "The difference between me and Jennifer," he would say in his speeches, "is that she chose to do the right thing even when it was hard. I chose the easy way out and almost destroyed several lives, including my own." The William Johnson program continued to grow. After 10 years of operation, it had benefited more than 50,000 people and become a model for similar programs in other Latin American countries. Jennifer, at 52, had become one of the most respected rehabilitation specialists in the world. She received invitations to give international lectures and provide consulting services for foreign governments. But her greatest pride wasn't the awards she received or the international recognition. It was being able to have lunch every Sunday with Mrs. Mary, now 87 years old, and hear from her the same words as always. "My daughter, I am the proudest mother in the world." "Why, Mom?" Jennifer would ask, even though she already knew the answer. "Because I have a daughter who turns pain into hope and problems into solutions. I learned that from you, Mom." "No, my daughter. You always had that inside you. I just believed." One autumn afternoon, Jennifer was visiting the grave of William Johnson with Michael and Elizabeth, as they did every year on the anniversary of his passing. "I think Dad would be amazed by everything that has happened," said Elizabeth, placing flowers on the grave. "Amazed and proud," added Michael, "especially knowing that it all started with someone having the courage to stand up and speak the truth." Jennifer looked at the headstone where it was written, "William Johnson, a man of integrity who believed in people." "You know what the greatest lesson I learned from all this was?" she asked. "What?" "That no matter how difficult our situation is, we always have a choice. We can become victims of our circumstances, or we can use those circumstances to become better people." "And you chose to become a better person," said Michael. "We all chose this," Jennifer corrected. "You could have also let yourselves be consumed by hatred and revenge. Instead, you chose forgiveness and rebuilding." "We learned that from you," said Elizabeth. "And I learned from you that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to stand by our side, especially in the most difficult times." As they were leaving the cemetery, Jennifer received a text message on her phone. It was from Christina, who now coordinated one of the rehabilitation centers. "Jennifer, today we helped our 1,000th person restart their life. Thank you for teaching me that our story only ends when we stop fighting to make it better." Jennifer smiled, put her phone away and looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the horizon with golden hues that reminded her of hope. "You know what amazes me the most?" she said to Michael and Elizabeth as they walked. "What?" How a situation that seemed like the end of everything turned into the beginning of something much bigger. Are you referring to the program? I'm referring to everything. Our family, the people we've helped, the lives that changed. All of this started because I refused to stay silent in the face of an injustice. And we refused to accept that you were guilty, added Michael. And so we discovered that when good people come together to do the right thing, miracles happen, concluded Elizabeth. That night, Jennifer was in her study, working on the draft of a new book about forgiveness and rebuilding, when the phone rang. Jennifer, this is Barbara from Denver. Do you remember me? Of course, Barbara, the businesswoman who started over after 60. How are you? Great. Actually, I'm calling with some news. I've decided to expand my company and create a professional training center for women over 50 who want to restart their careers. What a wonderful idea. And I wanted to know if you would agree to be our patron and give the opening lecture. It would be an honor, Barbara. You know, Jennifer, sometimes I think that if I hadn't read your story, I might have given up on everything. Barbara, your strength was inside you all along. I just helped you find it. That's exactly what I want to do for other women. Help them find the strength they already have. After hanging up, Jennifer returned to writing her new book. The chapter she was working on was called The Power of Small Acts of Courage. We don't need grand heroic gestures to change the world, she wrote. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to stand up and speak the truth. Sometimes it's just believing in someone when everyone else has given up. Sometimes it's forgiving when it would be easier to hold a grudge. Every act of courage, no matter how small, creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. A word of encouragement can save a life. An act of forgiveness can free not only the one who forgives, but also the one who is forgiven. An opportunity offered can transform a life's trajectory. Life has taught me that we are not victims of our past. We are the architects of our future. And that regardless of what we've lived through, we always have the opportunity to write a better chapter. 15 years after that transformative day in court, Jennifer was giving her final lecture as the national coordinator of the William Johnson program. At 55, she had decided to retire to dedicate more time to writing and to activities with Mrs. Mary, now 90 years old. During all these years, she said to an audience of over 1,000 people, I've learned that true justice isn't just about punishing those who do wrong, but about offering opportunities to those who want to do right. I've learned that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. That hope is not naivety, but wisdom. And that each one of us has the power to make a difference in someone's life. The William Johnson program will continue under new leadership with competent and dedicated people. But the most important thing isn't the program's continuity. It's the continuity of the spirit that created it, the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. In the audience, Michael and Elizabeth Johnson, now in their 50s, applauded proudly. Johnson Construction had become a conglomerate of companies focused on social responsibility, always maintaining the integrity values that William Johnson had planted. Also in the audience were hundreds of people whose lives had been impacted by the program. Former inmates who were now business owners, young people who had abandoned a life of crime, women who had rebuilt their lives after injustices. Christina, now the national director of the program, would take the stage next to officially assume the position Jennifer was leaving. Before I finish, Jennifer continued, I want to read a letter I received last week. It's from a 12-year-old girl, the daughter of one of the women who went through our program. Aunt Jennifer, my name is Emily. My mother always talks about you. She says you saved our family when you gave her an opportunity to start over. I want you to know that when I grow up, I also want to help people like you do. My mother says you proved that one person can change the world. I want to change the world too. Jennifer paused, emotional. Emily, if you're hearing me on television, I want you to know that you are already changing the world. Because when a child grows up seeing that it's possible to overcome difficulties, that it's possible to forgive, that it's possible to start over, she grows up knowing there are no limits to the good she can do. And that is my final message to all of you. Don't wait for someone special to make a difference. You are already special. Don't wait for the perfect moment to act. The moment is now. Don't wait for grand opportunities to help. Sometimes the greatest help is simply believing in someone. When Jennifer left the stage, she was surrounded by hundreds of people who wanted to thank her personally. Every hug, every word of gratitude, every story of overcoming confirmed that her decision years ago to stand up in that courtroom had been worth it. "Jennifer," said a grey-haired lady, "my son went through the program 5 years ago. Today, he has his own business and employs 15 people. I wanted to thank you for giving me back my son." "I didn't give him back," Jennifer replied, smiling. "I just helped you see that he was always there, waiting for an opportunity." "Professor Jennifer," said a young man, "I was a drug user and was lost in life. The program gave me not just a job, but a purpose. Now, I run a treatment center for addicts. And how does that make you feel? Like I've finally found the reason I went through all of that, so I can help other people get out of the same hole." "That's exactly it," said Jennifer. "Our scars become our strength when we use them to help others heal theirs." 2 hours later, when she finally managed to say goodbye to everyone, Jennifer went home where Mrs. Mary Wilson was waiting for her with a special dinner. "How was your last official speech, my daughter?" "Emotional, Mom, but also liberating. I feel like I've fulfilled my mission." "Your mission will never be completely fulfilled," said Mrs. Wilson with the wisdom of her 90 years, "because every person you inspired will inspire others and so on. Your influence will keep multiplying for generations. Do you think I did the right thing by retiring? I think you did what your heart told you to do, as you always have. And your heart has never let you down." That night, Jennifer was organizing her personal files when she found a folder with newspaper clippings from the time of her arrest. She read some of the headlines: "Former employee arrested for theft, accountant embezzles company money, woman betrays boss's trust." In another folder, she found more recent headlines: "Former inmate saves company from fraud, reintegration program breaks records, woman who was a victim of injustice becomes a symbol of hope." "Funny," she murmured, "how the same story can be told in such different ways, depending on how much we know about it." She picked up a blank sheet of paper and began to write. "Dear future reader, if you are reading this, you are probably going through a difficult time. Maybe you feel wronged, betrayed, abandoned. Maybe you think there is no way out of your situation. I want you to know that I have been in the darkest place a person can be. I lost my freedom, my reputation, my career. I almost lost hope. There were days when I thought it would be easier to give up. But I learned something I want to share with you. No matter how deep the darkness, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes we ourselves are that light for other people. You don't need to be perfect to make a difference. You don't need to have all the answers to help someone. You just need to have the courage to try. If your life seems destroyed today, remember that sometimes we need to completely dismantle something to rebuild it better. If you feel alone today, remember that there is someone somewhere who needs exactly what you have to offer. Your pain was not in vain. Your tears were not wasted. Your struggle was not useless. All of this can become the bridge that will take you and other people to a better place. Don't give up. The world needs your story. The world needs your strength. The world needs you. With affection and hope, Jennifer Wilson. She folded the letter and placed it inside her new book, which would be published in 6 months. In the years that followed, Jennifer dedicated herself to writing, to the family she had chosen, and to the small daily causes that made a difference in the lives of the people around her. At 60, she published her 5th book, a complete autobiography called The Woman Who Wouldn't Be Silenced. The book became a worldwide phenomenon, being translated into more than 30 languages. But what made her most proud wasn't the success of the books, but the letters she received from readers all over the world, telling her how her story had changed their lives. One such letter came from a woman in Norway. "Dear Jennifer, I am an immigrant who arrived here without speaking the local language and without knowing anyone. My husband abandoned me and I was left alone with 3 small children. I read your book translated into Norwegian and decided not to give up. Today, I have a small catering business and can support my family with dignity. Thank you for teaching me that there is always a way out. Another came from a young man in Japan. Professor Jennifer, at 17 I made a serious mistake and was sentenced to 2 years in a juvenile reintegration center. Everyone told me my life was over. Then I read your story and understood that my life was just beginning. Now I study law and want to work with restorative justice. You showed me that our mistakes can become our strength. And so the ripples continued to spread, reaching places Jennifer never imagined her story could touch. At 65, she was invited to give a lecture at the United Nations on justice, forgiveness, and social reconstruction. It was the first time a former inmate from America had spoken at the UN General Assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, before the representatives of 193 countries, "I come here not as an expert in international politics, but as someone who learned, in the hardest way, that a society's true strength lies not in its capacity to punish, but in its capacity to heal. Each one of you represents millions of people who at some point in their lives will need a second chance. People who made mistakes and want to make things right. People who were wronged and need justice. People who lost hope and need to get it back. What I'm proposing isn't a specific program or a particular public policy. What I'm proposing is a change in mindset, that we start seeing in people not just what they did wrong, but what they can do right." The speech received a 5-minute standing ovation. Several countries committed to implementing resocialization programs based on the American model developed by Jennifer. When she returned to America, she was greeted at the airport by a crowd. Michael and Elizabeth were there, as was Christina, attorney Henry Davidson, who had become one of the program's main collaborators, and hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by her work. But the person Jennifer looked for first in the crowd was Mrs. Mary, now 95 years old, sitting in a wheelchair but with eyes shining with pride. "How did it go, my daughter?" "It was moving, Mom. I talked about you too." "About me?" "I said that I learned about forgiveness from a woman who forgave me every day for my childhood mistakes, who taught me that I could always be better the next day." Mrs. Mary smiled with tears in her eyes. "My daughter, you've become so much more than I ever dreamed was possible. I only managed to be who I am because I had a mother who always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." That night at home, Jennifer was reviewing the speech she had given at the UN when she received a call from an international number. "Ms. Wilson, this is Margaret Johnson, coordinator of the Resocialization Program in Mexico. We watched your speech at the UN and would like to invite you to help us implement a similar program here." "It would be an honor to help," Jennifer replied. "Actually, we already have 15 countries interested in implementing programs based on your model." "That's wonderful. But I need to be clear that it wasn't just my model. It was a collective effort by thousands of people who believed it was possible to do things differently." "Exactly. And that's what we want to replicate. That belief that it's possible to do things differently." Over the next 2 years, Jennifer traveled the world helping different countries implement resocialization programs. She visited Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Portugal, Spain, and even the United States. In each place, she found stories similar to her own. People who had been wronged, who had made mistakes, who needed second chances. And in each place, she saw how small gestures of hope could transform entire communities. At 68, she decided it was time to slow down for good. Mrs. Mary had turned 98 and needed more care. Michael and Elizabeth, now grandparents, had completely taken over the management of Johnson Construction, which continued to be a model of a socially responsible company. "Mom," said Elizabeth during a Sunday lunch, "don't you think you've done enough? It's time to rest." "I think we never do enough," Jennifer replied, "but I agree it's time to rest." "And what are your plans now?" asked Michael. "I want to write one more book, a compilation of the most inspiring stories I've encountered over all these years, and I want to spend as much time as possible with Grandma Mary." "What will the book be called?" asked Elizabeth. "The Women Who Stood Up. Stories of women from all over the world who had the courage to face injustice and turn their pain into strength. Will it include your own story? My story will be just one among many. Because I learned that I am not unique, There are thousands of women who every day make brave choices to make the world a little better. The book was launched 2 years later, on the 10th anniversary of William Johnson's death. The launch ceremony took place at the cemetery where he was buried as a symbolic tribute to the man who had inspired it all. "Mr. Johnson," said Jennifer, speaking to the headstone, "you always said that a person's greatest asset is their reputation. Today I can say that I have not only recovered my reputation, but I have built a legacy that goes far beyond what I ever imagined was possible." The program that bears your name has already benefited more than 100,000 people in America and thousands more in 17 countries. Your company remains an example of integrity. Your children have become even better people than they already were. But most importantly, your example of integrity continues to inspire people to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. Michael placed a flower on the grave. "Dad, I think you would be proud to know that your story didn't end with your departure. It multiplied through the lives you touched, and especially through Jennifer," added Elizabeth, "who turned an injustice into a force for good." As they were leaving the cemetery, Jennifer was approached by a young journalist who wanted an interview. "Mrs. Wilson, after all these years, how do you summarize your journey?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "You know, when I was young, I thought success was having a stable career, my own home, a predictable life. Then I thought happiness was simply not suffering injustices. Today, I know that true success is using our experiences, good and bad, to make a difference in other people's lives. And that true happiness comes from knowing that our time in this world left it a little bit better." "Do you have any regrets?" "I do. I wish I had had the courage to speak the truth sooner in some situations. I wish I had forgiven some people more quickly. I wish I had embraced more and judged less." "And if you could give advice to someone going through a difficult situation?" "To remember that every storm passes, that every night is followed by a dawn, and that sometimes the most difficult situations in our lives are the ones that lead us to places we never imagined we could reach. But mainly," Jennifer added, "to never underestimate the power of standing up and speaking the truth. You never know how many lives you can change with a simple act of courage." That night, Jennifer was at home with Mrs. Wilson, who, despite being 100 years old, could still hold lucid conversations most of the time. "My daughter," said the elderly woman, "do you think it was worth it? All the pain, all the struggle, all the battle?" Jennifer looked at her mother, thinking about everything she had lived through. The wrongful imprisonment, the humiliation, the years of struggle to rebuild her reputation, but also the thousands of lives she had helped transform, the family she had gained, the legacy she was leaving. "Mom, if I could go back in time and avoid everything that happened, I don't know if I would do it. Because avoiding the suffering would also mean avoiding all the lives I managed to touch, all the people I managed to help. That is very generous of you, my daughter. It's not generosity, Mom, it's honesty. I learned that our life is not measured by the moments of happiness we had, but by the good we did during the difficult moments." "And you did very well, my daughter. Very well." 2 weeks later, Mrs. Mary passed away peacefully in her sleep at 100 years and 2 months old. Jennifer was holding her hand when she passed. The funeral was a celebration of the life of a woman who had raised an extraordinary daughter and lived to see the fruit of a lifetime dedicated to love and faith in people. "Mrs. Mary," said Michael during the burial, "you didn't just raise an exceptional woman. You planted seeds of kindness that are now blooming all over the world. Your daughter learned from you that it's possible to love unconditionally, forgive completely, and believe infinitely in people," added Elizabeth. Jennifer, despite the pain of the loss, felt at peace. Mrs. Mary had passed away knowing that her daughter had found her place in the world and that her legacy would continue through the generations. At 70 years old, Jennifer decided to write her last book, Letters to My Mother, a collection of reflections on everything she had learned from Mrs. Mary. "Dear Mother," she wrote in the first letter, "today marks 2 years since your passing, and not a day goes by that I don't feel your presence. You taught me that true love doesn't end with death but transforms into inspiration to keep living with purpose. The book became a phenomenon among readers of all ages, especially among daughters who had lost their mothers and found consolation in Jennifer's words. One such reader wrote, "Jennifer, I lost my mother 6 months ago and was inconsolable. Your book helped me understand that I didn't lose my mother, but gained an eternal guardian. Now every time I do something good, I feel it's a way to honor her memory." At 75 years old, Jennifer received an unexpected phone call. It was the president of the American Academy of Arts and Letters. "Ms. Wilson, we have the honor of inviting you to occupy seat number 17 of the Academy, which is currently vacant." "But I'm not an academic writer," protested Jennifer. "I'm just someone who writes about her experiences." "Exactly for that reason. The Academy needs voices like yours, voices that connect literature with real life, that use words to transform the world." Jennifer accepted the invitation and, at 76 years old, became the first former inmate to occupy a seat in the American Academy of Arts and Letters. In her induction speech, she said, "I am not here because of exceptional literary merit. I am here because I believe in the transformative power of words. Words that comfort those who suffer, that inspire those who have given up, that connect those who feel alone. Literature is not just art, it is also hope, and I hope to use this position to continue planting seeds of hope in hearts that need to believe it's possible to start over." The William Johnson program, under the coordination of Christina and her team, continued to grow. It had expanded to 25 countries and benefited more than 500,000 people. Christina, now 50 years old, had become one of the world's leading experts in rehabilitation, but she always made sure to credit Jennifer as her greatest inspiration. "Jennifer didn't just create a program," she said in her international lectures. "She created a movement of people who believe that everyone deserves a second chance." At 80 years old, Jennifer decided it was time to retire completely. She spent her days reading, writing letters to her adoptive grandchildren, children of Michael and Elizabeth, and receiving visits from people all over the world who wanted to meet her in person. One such visitor was a 40-year-old woman from France. "Ms. Wilson, my name is Claire Wilson. I am the director of a rehabilitation center in New York. I came here because I wanted to personally meet the woman who inspired our work." "Claire, I'm happy to meet you. How is the program working over there?" "Wonderfully well. Our recidivism rate is only 3%, but more importantly, we are changing French society's perception of former inmates. That makes me very proud." "Mrs. Wilson, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you still feel anger about what happened to you so many years ago?" Jennifer smiled. "You know, Claire, I haven't felt anger in a long time. I feel gratitude." "Gratitude?" "Yes, because if that hadn't happened, I would never have discovered my true calling. I would never have met so many amazing people. I would never have had the opportunity to make the difference I've made. Do you really believe that everything happens for a reason? I believe we can give a reason to everything that happens to us. We can choose to learn, to grow, and to use our experiences to help others." That's very profound. It's very simple, actually. Life gives us situations. We choose what to do with them. At 82, Jennifer received the news that she had been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in the field of re-socialization and restorative justice. "Jennifer," said Michael, emotional, "you could win the Nobel." "Michael," she replied, laughing, "I won that prize a long time ago." "What prize?" "The prize of having lived a life with purpose. The prize of having turned pain into love. The prize of having met wonderful people like you. But the Nobel would be the worldwide recognition of your work." "I already have worldwide recognition. Every person who managed to restart their life is a medal. Every family that was reunited is a trophy. Every young person who chose a different path is a victory." Jennifer did not win the Nobel that year, but she was nominated for 3 consecutive years, becoming the first American woman to receive so many consecutive nominations for the prize. At 85, her health began to decline. Michael and Elizabeth, now also in their 60s, took turns caring for her, just as she had cared for Mrs. Mary. "How do you feel knowing you probably won't see all the fruits of what you planted?" asked Elizabeth during one of these visits. I feel at peace, Jennifer replied, because I know I planted good seeds in fertile soil. You, Christina, all the program coordinators, the people who were helped and who now help others. These seeds will keep germinating for generations. Is there anything you wish you had done differently? Jennifer thought for a long time. I wish I had hugged more. I wish I had said I love you more often. I wish I had wasted less time worrying about small things. But regarding your work, your mission, oh, that no. I did exactly what my heart asked me to do. And that's how a life should be lived. 1 month before turning 86, Jennifer gathered Michael, Elizabeth, and Christina at her home. I want you to know, she said, that I am the most fulfilled woman in the world. Why, Jennifer? Asked Christina. Because I managed to turn the worst experience of my life into the most important one. Because I found a beautiful family where I least expected it. Because I saw people transform and transform other people. And mainly because I learned that life is not about what happens to us, but about what we do with what happens to us. Jennifer, said Michael, you know you will be remembered forever, right? I hope so. But not as Jennifer Wilson, the woman who was unjustly imprisoned. I hope to be remembered as Jennifer Wilson, the woman who stood up. Stood up in the courtroom that day? Asked Elizabeth. Stood up every day after that. Because standing up is not a single act, it's a choice we make every day. The choice not to give up, not to bow to circumstances, to keep believing in the good. On her 86th birthday, Jennifer received hundreds of birthday cards from people all over the world. Children who had been born in homes rebuilt by the program, young people who had avoided a life of crime, women who had found the strength to start over. But the gift that moved her the most was a video made by Christina, featuring testimonials from people on every continent who had been impacted by her work. A woman from Australia said, Jennifer taught me that it's possible to forgive the unforgivable. A man from Canada, Jennifer showed me that our mistakes can become our strength. A young woman from Mexico, Jennifer proved to me that it's never too late to start over. And so on, hundreds of testimonials from people who had found hope through the story of a woman who refused to be silent in the face of injustice. End of story. Tell us, do you believe Jennifer made the right choice by standing up in that courtroom? What impressed you most about her journey? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.